Right, everyone, thank you very much. We're about to start session 3, the one you've all been waiting for, generative AI for telcos. It's the word I can't pronounce. Generative or generative, take your pick. What can we say about Gen AI that hasn't already been said? Nothing. Let's go home now. No, because there's an awful lot that relates to telcos, and that's what we're here to talk about now. What's in it for telcos? That's the big question. How will telcos benefit from Gen AI? Really, really important topic. We are, as always, going to go to the floor for your questions. We're really keen on your questions. We have some presentations as well, but before we do, I'm going to ask my guests if they would like to introduce themselves, starting on my far right with Francis.
Hi, I'm Francis Haysom. I'm Principal Analyst with Appledore Research. My focus of research is specifically looking at network data management and observability in the network, and obviously the application of that data and its usage by the network. That's me.
Thanks, Francis.
Hi, I'm Azhar Sayeed at Red Hat, responsible for technology and architecture, and specifically in the area of AI. We've been working in different spaces, particularly around infrastructure management, automation. That includes some of the generative AI work, which I'm going to talk about.
Hi, I'm Neil McRae. I'm Juniper Networks. We're a leader in AI-powered networks. No, not for discussion. It's a fact. It's not what I say, it's what people tell me.
Hi, my name is Akira Tada from SoftBank. I run Executive Briefing Center and also Innovation Lab at SoftBank. So probably today I may have some sort of maybe unique profile, but I would try to contribute this panel from different perspectives.
Well, we're going to look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much. We are going to start with Francis. Francis, had to come to the lectern.
I'm not specifically going to talk about generative AI. I'm going to talk about more general problems because we're really at the beginning of the generative AI journey in telcos, and it's part of a more wider range of issues. So just very briefly, I'm going to introduce what I see as some of the key issues, some of them we've identified. First is data acquisition. I think everybody says we can't get enough data. Where are we getting the data? Where is the data hidden? But I'd like to sort of emphasize it's not just about getting the data that is already in the CSPs network. It's as much about how do we share data? How do we get data from other sources that help affect our decision making? How do we share data within CSPs? CSPs are not renowned for sharing data for very, very valid reasons, but often some of the things that we will want to do with AI and generative AI in specific will require the sharing of data, sharing of insight, or sharing the data that can inform the insight. The second area I think we need to, and Neil introduced it a little bit, the biggest problem in the network is actually I, not AI. We don't really have we have a very black and white view of decision making in the telco. If we want to introduce AI, we need to do it in the context that it's doing a better job than what we're doing at the moment with human beings, and that it's affecting something. So we need to look very much a little bit more widely at the whole idea of black and white, the black and white view of decision making, that what we do currently is the right way of doing it, and this unknown model is going to be a problem. We need effective ways of comparing it and seeing when things are better and are not worse. And it's an area where telcos haven't necessarily been the best at it. They don't generally record decision making. They react to things and make decisions, often not recording them. Poor models and bias, somewhat tied into the area. We need to recognize, say, a CSP in North America, for example, has a very different set of characteristics of how they need to run the network from, say, in the UK, which is a much more densely populated country. We need to be able to share insights that are relevant to rural areas, dense city areas, whatever. And that can't be just single models or single biases in that. We need to be bringing more data together. Regulation and data privacy, very, very important, but at the same time, again, coming back to data, we need to find ways of data regulation and data privacy not simply being a reason not to do something. We need to think more cleverly, and particularly where some of the competitors or the increasing competitors for telcos will use the data in a much more clever and agile way. Big issue, I think, and we have hinted at this today, is the mechanization of the status quo. The danger that we see AI as simply being a better way of doing what we do at the moment. The classic cases are NOC, for example. I'm going to apply AI to make better NOC engineers make better decisions. We need to also be thinking about wider things of how do we remove aspects of the NOC? How could we introduce intelligence? SON networks were introduced a little way back. A lot of the reason for challenges there is the tradition of running a network in a particular way there. And finally, I think we have to say there's a degree of confusion and hype about some of the terminology here. I've heard lots of examples which may be they may be big data analytics, they may be decision-making AI, they may be hinting at GenAI in terms of ChatGPT. There's a lot of hype in this organization. And so for Telco to make the jump here, we need to be doing a little bit more clarity about what it is we're meaning and how we're using it. It doesn't mean any of these terms are wrong or that they don't introduce intelligence in the network, but we need a lot more clarity about what we are actually doing. Wrong button. How we see the telco driven is these aspects of more data, etc., needs more collaboration. So at the front of it, we can't do this all alone. CSPs can't do it on their own. Their OEMs can't do it on their own, and to a degree, their SIs, particularly. I come from an OSS background. Big aspect of OSS delivery is SIs and whatever. The type of change that we want here needs collaboration of that. And that isn't the natural place of a lot of these relationships at the moment in terms of CSPs. But if we're really to get the real outcomes of AI to scale to the kind of level of some of the open AIs or the Microsofts of the world, you'll need that kind of collaboration to work. It needs to be driven by outcomes. Some words that need to be part of this thing. You need to be thinking about innovation, not simply replicating what you do at the moment. You need to be much more proactive. What do I want? Where do I want to be? Not how am I reacting to what I'm doing at the moment. And as I said, partnership. And the last thing around the outside is just this idea. We're very used to trying trials, and we like proof of concepts. But they're generally with the AI and in some aspects the cloud as well. We need to be thinking not just about innovating in a proof of concept or a trial. We need to think about how do we take that through to scale and iterate that over and over again, because that's the way we're actually going to generate information in that area. Thank you.
Francis, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Setting up the challenges for us very nicely indeed. I'm just checking, I think, because Neil's got some slides. I think we might be going to Neil next. Is that right? We're going to Neil next? We are indeed. Neil, please.
Thank you. So I wanted to kind of expand a little bit on some of the points Francis has made. And I'm going to start because actually what I've learned, I spent a lot of time working on AI. My previous organization, we had hundreds of patents in AI, and it's something that my fear about how complex the network was getting versus our human ability to cope with it, together with the fact that I don't know how long I've been cleaning data for. I think it feels like the second day I started working in this industry, I was cleaning data. I don't believe we'll ever fix that problem. So if it's true that we can never sort our data out, but it's true that we need that data to be sorted out so we can continue to run the network, how do I deal with that paradox? AI is my answer. But I wanted to go back to just a few points about generative AI, because I don't think really people really get how big this has become. But also the hype and the knowledge behind it. It's like, I can remember the day after the big generative AI, there's like 4 telcos saying, well, we're experts in this. And it's like, yeah, well, they knew nothing about it. It's just not realistic to pick up that knowledge. But look at this. Look how much money is going into it. Look how fast people logging into to trial it. Most of them trying to write funny anecdotes about themselves, no doubt. But also look at the pace of development, right? This is the bar exam and how well GPT did in the bar exam. Hey, I wouldn't like to be a lawyer right now. I actually asked ChatGPT to create me a non-disclosure agreement. I gave it to my friend who's a lawyer. He was like, he said, Neil, you should have been a lawyer. And I told him it was done by ChatGPT. He nearly had a heart attack. He was amazed how good it was. And why am I raising that as a point is actually generative AI and AI in general will work really well in some areas, but actually it will not work well in other areas. And this is one of the things I've started to learn, which is how do we ensure that we make that, and it goes back to the kind of AI doom that came up this morning, how do we ensure that we're using AI in the areas where it's going to make a difference and don't use it actually where it's not going to make a difference and actually might detract from the areas that it does make a difference in. And I'm a super believer in AI and the network. Here's another piece of knowledge from this, actually from McKinsey. I'm always a bit cautious about using their slides, but this was a useful one in terms of actually where is generative AI tools making a difference, right? Creating documents is a huge one, and actually we do a lot of that in Telco. We create all these documents that typically not huge people read because they're hard to read or hard to find. Market and sales, products and development of service, some service operations. So there are areas of great focus in Telco's risk, and then you've got a bunch of other stuff. Supply chain, manufacturing. I was surprised by manufacturing, but more you dig into it, it kind of makes sense. This is a paper from Harvard, and again, the reason I wanted to give this is because actually I think that one of the biggest barriers to AI and generative AI is us, the humans. Not just in terms of fear and privacy; those things are super important, and regulation, but also in somewhat of our willingness to say we want AI to fail. And it's kind of weird. I've heard a lot of that in certain meetings. So here's a test where the different versions of GPT with the organization's best approach to doing it and how well it does. Actually, it falls a little bit behind. And this is the point I want to make. If you're really good at what you do, some of these tools aren't actually going to help you, right? But if you're really bad at what you do, oh boy, you're in for a real boost in productivity, right? And this is the danger. Yeah, sorry, Ray, I've given your secret away. No, this is really important because we could end up with a technology that really doesn't help us with overall efficiency and performance if we're not quicker. And then especially here in the UK and in Europe more generically, that's already a big problem for us. This would make it even worse. But look what happens when you kind of take more of the human element out of it, right? So this is a condition where we're effectively automating the use of ChatGPT. And because of that, it performs way better than even the best control. And I think this is something that, I look at that and think, because one of my worries about especially generative AI is actually it gets a lot of things wrong. And in Telco, we can't afford to get a lot of things wrong. In fact, we can barely afford to get one thing wrong, right? Otherwise, you're that important 999 call that dispatches an ambulance to your mother's house to get her into hospital doesn't happen. So, I've kind of rethought my view on that, which is actually it can work, but you've got to think about it. We as telcos have to think about it with the usual mission critical approach that we think about it. And then finally, I won't go on this slide too long, but AI is brilliant for creative stuff, or you think it's brilliant for creative stuff. It's really great at grabbing someone else's creative stuff and repackaging it. And this is going to be a big issue in the future. I'm not going to dwell on that too much. But what it's really bad at is solving problems in the way that you think about it. because AI, it's hard for it to learn how to solve problems. That's an advantage we humans only have. But that's okay, because in today's network, the solving of problems is offline from the network running today. It's good news for us as engineers, I think. But there's also a way, so this comes from BCG, who were really worried that GPT could really have an impact on their consulting business. They were really, really worried about it, and quite rightly so. But what they found is actually for certain aspects of their business, where they help with creative product and innovation, this was a worry. But actually business problem solving, which is I think the bigger part of their business, actually it's not so good. And again, I go back to the point earlier, if you're not so good at what you do, this technology will make you slightly better. If you're already great, it probably won't make a difference. But then there's the other aspect of how do you train someone to leverage this technology? And again, what you found is in the training, sometimes the training is biased in terms of the best uses for this. And actually experimentation works out a lot better if you actually try and experiment with this tool in your own use case, in your own thing that you're trying to do, rather than kind of learn a lot about how it works and almost become accustomed to how it works. Actually just go out there and do it. Actually, I'll skip this slide. But one of the things I just want to also point out is, so these are kind of different tasks, and I'll put this slide up somewhere so you can have a better look at it. But actually, there are areas where generative AI will help in terms of probably efficiency or production of things, but in terms of actually taking things, significantly forward, is it actually going to make a bigger difference as we think? This was from London Business School. The view was, in some areas, yes, but in a lot of areas, actually, it's probably not going to make that much of a difference. So, and why am I presenting this as well? Because, as I said before, the network is a mission-critical thing. We are supporting the real-time kind of life or death or supply of goods, or we're just the thing that's there that make just about everything else in the world work. And if we leverage technology that detracts from that, I don't think that would be good. I'm not saying don't use this technology, by the way. That's 100% what I'm not saying. I'm saying be certain about where you want to use it, how you want to use it, and how you're going to deploy it. But then also how you're measuring it and its effectiveness. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Neil. Thank you very much. Azhar.
Lovely.
Sorry, that was a bit long.
No, it was absolutely fascinating. Now, will we get planning capability? Will it crack the planning capability? Eh? Well, maybe we'll talk about that soon. Azhar, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Guy. Just building upon what Neil said, AI is as good as the models that you build and the data on which you train with it. So just like he did, I also did. I asked ChatGPT. In fact, I didn't ask. One of my, colleagues in the office asked ChatGPT, "Who's Azhar Sayeed?" And ChatGPT came back, and this is GPT-4, by the way, that came back and said, "Oh, Azhar is so-and-so, but he works for Google." Well, no, I've never worked for Google. So there is an example that gives you, it's as good as the data that you feed it. I'm sure it picked up some of my publications or some of the work that I did, and somehow thought, for whatever reason, it didn't bother to even check LinkedIn, on which my employment history is listed completely. So that's an interesting point. Now, getting to our conversation, what I'm going to do, the work that we are doing in Red Hat is a little bit more narrowly focused on using GenAI for specific purposes in terms of how do we build an intelligent infrastructure which could potentially be autonomous at some point in time. We don't know what that point in time is at some point in time. Now, we know that autonomous network stuff is the conversation that's been happening for more than a decade. In fact, one of Neil's colleagues, Kiriti from Juniper, has talked about autonomous networks, I think, at least 10 or 12 years ago. I was part of that entire conversation at that time with him. And he talks about exactly how do you tune the network, how do you tune the metrics, how do you tune the routing protocols to make it much more autonomous in terms of its operations, learning different routes and building different forwarding paths and et cetera, et cetera. What I thought was, well, what applies to networks can generally apply to infrastructure itself. It's about taking the data, and it's about then using that particular data to do the right kind of analytics, and then actually going into the predictive behavior of that. And so what I thought was, what would be some of the three pillars that would look at this autonomous infrastructure if we were to look at it at a broad level? Now, in this infrastructure, I'm including pretty much everything, not just the network component of it, but also the data centers, the far edge data centers, the hardware and the software, and so on and so forth. So if you look at those three pillars, one is, of course, the infrastructure itself, where you have to automate. I think in the previous panel, we had this conversation about how much quality of data is necessary, and I just gave you the example of quality of data. Where can you get that data? You can get that data through automation. And there are now operators talking about what is called as hyper-automation. That means they're going to operate everything from not just, configuration and day zero and zero-touch provisioning but everything, including the business processes that they're talking about in terms of automating it. Now, when you do that, you have an opportunity to actually do instrumentation across that. When you instrument it, you get the right kind of data, and you can then actually curate that particular data with respect to building the right kind of quality in it. So you do analytics, and then once you get that data, you can do that analytics, and then you start to apply intelligence associated with it. Now, you can take the data and create simple closed-loop systems. When you create closed-loop systems, what you're doing is basically reacting to what the data is telling you. You're not doing predictive behavior yet, you're doing reactive behavior. And that is also being done by number of, telcos, large enterprises today already in some shape or form in terms of reacting to the behavior. You define certain thresholds and you say, oh, this threshold is today. You might just send an alarm. Tomorrow, you might actually take that threshold and say, I'm going to make this configuration change. That's a reactive behavior. But then as you have more and more data and the right quality of data, you build those models, then now you can actually start to do predictive behavior. When that predictive behavior comes along, that's when the opportunity for GenAI actually comes into picture. Now, then, of course, we didn't talk about this autonomy and governance conversation, but that's actually a big order of conversation, in particular around generative AI, because one of the things that Neil briefly pointed out previously, Francis also talked about, is how do you attribute? How do you attribute what is being generated, and to whom do you attribute that? I think that's an interesting conversation in itself. I don't know if we'll have the time to do it. But what I'm talking about is really the focus that we have is around, if you take a broad swath of infrastructure, core data centers, edge data centers, far edge data centers, central offices as data centers, and on and on and on. There's this network footprint across there. There is, hardware footprint across there. There's a software footprint across there. And across all of them, is there a view you can build using the data to actually do and use generative AI in particular to actually manage that? Now, here are some use cases for AI ops for telcos. This is a conversation we've started having with many different telcos in this particular space. Now, in those use cases, you'll talk about this predictive X. I think a lot of people know about it. But things like anomaly detection. Now, once you detect an anomaly by looking at the data analytics, how do you act upon it? You can use generative AI to act upon that. So if you have those sources of data defined, then you have those rules, right? And then you actually take actions associated with those rules. Where generative AI can be really useful is how do you translate those rules into actions that you can actually use to implement and manage that particular infrastructure. So that's really a conversation where generative AI can be incredibly useful. Self-organized networks. We all talk about generative AI in chatbots. We all talk about generative AI in marketing campaigns. Well, those are also useful for telcos as well because they need to market their products. They need to do customer care and all of those functions. I'm not taking anything away from that. But what I'm narrowly focusing on in terms of my context, my research, or my topic is mostly around how do I build an AI-based operations model and particularly use generative AI. So network configurations, assurance and SLA, proving and management, using GenAI capability and techniques, right? And of course, traffic analysis and network planning, I think, which I briefly spoke about. So you could actually then take that AI-driven smart operations conversation into many different spaces, using GenAI as a very critical tool to go into, observability. You have better observability. You can actually build better data, build better data models, and through that, then create. Today, Red Hat did launch a product back in May, not to talk about marketing here, but to talk about the context of that, is you can point something like Ansible, which is an automation tool, to a specific environment that is yours with the data that you have, to be able to generate playbooks so that you can actually, for example, you want to generate a playbook that checks, compliance across your infrastructure. You just point it to your inventory, it can auto-generate a playbook for you, right? Now, this is used, of course, being done through AI tools in the background and using generative AI as a capability to be able to build that. I just gave that as a small example, but there are many different examples I think we can come across to do that. Energy efficiency, you just saw the panel earlier on in terms of the energy efficiency. There are some interesting open source projects in that space, by the way, a project called Kepler, and then, of course, service management there. I know, Raj, you have a question, but I think I'm going to pass the baton.
Quick clarification question, because I think you seem to be confusing AI with generative AI, because some of the examples you gave are not application of generative AI. Those are applications of AI. Generative AI cannot create a playbook by itself for compliance checking, right? That requires analytics. That generative AI is...
I'm talking about using generative AI as a tool, as part of AI overall, to be able to generate that capability, which we have, and I can show you that, right? Cool.
Great. Azhar, thank you very much. Great, lovely. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone. So we've set up the challenges. We've realised it's such a huge market we're talking about here, albeit with limitations, and we started to apply that to automation and AI ops. Now, we've had some presentations. I'm sure there are a few more questions from our audience that we should get stuck into right away. So, Chris, I'm going to come down to Chris first, the front row. Chris. Press the button, please. We've got it.
Does that make me live? Chris Lewis Insight, and tomorrow's great telco debate. Looking forward to that. The question that occurs to me, and it's raised by all of you in your opening remarks, is that it's all about the facing inwards towards the network, and yet surely the thing, to go to Neil's point, the thing which we as an industry are really bad at is the customer service and actually addressing the customer. Is that seems to be missing from many people's thinking? Is that because it's a whole different area of suppliers, of the contact centers and genesis of these worlds? But surely, to Neil's point, that's where a lot of this focus should be.
Thanks, Chris. Anybody like to tackle this question? Neil, do you want to start first?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think you're spot on, Chris. I think it's, if I had Josie, who used to work for me at BT here, she'd rattle off how the wider telco is using AI in this space, and it is my point, which is, it almost feels like there's an AI or kind of AI party more generically, which is, to be cool, let's find out a way of using AI. Actually, let's step back and think, where's the best place to use AI, right? Because I think, telcos were historically, if I put my telco hat back on for a minute, we're historically not great at dealing with customers. This is an area where it can just, it can make life easier for us. If we added a ChatGPT interface to our Mist product, and it allows, IT users to say, why wasn't Bob able to log on? And it will actually tell you, here's why. And that instantly is like, well, that's awesome. I got the answer right away. And I can't help but think that telcos could take that example on why is my broadband slow? It's actually because the Wi-Fi where you are in the house isn't as close to where it could be. So I think you're right. I think, Chris, there's as big an opportunity in the kind of non-network side space as there is in the network side space. Perhaps even bigger in some respects.
Just one quick point. I think totally agree in terms of actually customer management and customer interface management. Generative AI can be very, very useful. The only reason why I was talking about a specific case around the infrastructure and internally is because of the work that I've been involved in doing it. Certainly, though there are different application companies that actually operate in that space, Red Hat doesn't. And that was the only reason why my focus was a little bit different. But yes, you're absolutely right.
Francis?
Chris, I think your point is very well made, but I think there's a favourite law of mine, which is Conway's law, which says that your systems replicate the departmental structure of your own organisation. And I think one of the things I mentioned, the danger in this whole area is about mechanising what we do at the moment. A lot of the aspects are, in reality, we have to accept that our networks are very disconnected from customers. I think that earlier it was made that only 10 companies companies really understand how the network affects their customers. If we're really to get the benefit out of Gen AI or AI more generally, we need to understand that we may need to change the problem we're actually trying to solve, that it is about making the connection between how a network affects the customer or what the real things that drive customer behavior as opposed to what we've always thought to drive customer behavior, and linking those two things.
Thanks, Francis. Good opportunity for Akira Tada to perhaps bring your perspective from SoftBank and what you're doing. And as you said earlier, you're going to bring a slightly different perspective here. But some of your thoughts on that question of the focus on the customer and generative AI as well.
Yeah, I think someone made a comment about the kind of a confusion between the use of AI and the use of generative AI. I think that's an interesting point. At SoftBank, like we've been adapting AI into the various business operations. And the biggest difference to let our employees using that types of technology. In the past, AI, it was just to assist us to get more efficient operations. So you put it like a search. So you put some words and get some answers. And you really don't need to have a lot of doubt that can I use this output to respond to something. But generative AI, it is let machines to generate answers, which poses different question. Can I use this output as my answer or my response? So we are testing the output from generative AIs and also AI. That how much judgment should we give employees to use the output to do some specific tasks like customer management?
Thank you very much for those insights. We've got some more hands coming up. David first.
I have the best position right in your line of sight. Somebody said the word customer, so it makes me think about something I'm going to talk about later on. We're talking about AI for the network operator, how it be used to improve the network performance, energy efficiency. But what about AI as a traffic type? So today, video takes up 60, 70% of the traffic capacity or whatever. With the exponential growth of AI apps and people putting in ChatGPT requests, as that goes 3 or 4 years forward, will AI data, training data, become as important as video data? Are there any predictions out there saying this may go that way, or do we not know? And if a lot of that data is not good, not optimal, isn't there some interest in sort of compressing that data, optimizing that data so it doesn't overload the network we're trying to optimize? So AI traffic as a data type, any predictions there?
So I don't know if I want to classify that as AI data type, but certainly observability is key. And observability is about actually learning what's happening in your infrastructure. The better quality of data you can get from your infrastructure, the better you can actually use it to optimize that. Now, what percentage of that would be the traffic? I don't have any reports on that topic, but I'm sure the more endpoints or the more metrics that you scrape from the infrastructure, the more obviously there's going to be data. So you'll have to think about data compression, you'll have to think of quality of data, you'll have to think about data management, anonymization, all of those topics. And yes, all of those topics would be key.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two sides to your question. Is what is the network for the infrastructure of AI, right? So, and what I've learned about AI is, and we use ChatGPT as an example. ChatGPT uses an insane amount of GPUs just for one transaction, right? And typically a server, you're only going to get so many GPUs. It's typically not enough. So you've got a lot of east-west traffic. Actually, we've been doing a lot of work in Juniper about how we can support that. We have a huge data center capability today. Actually, can we get to the right latencies? Can we get to the right availability? And the answer is yes. We've got a platform that can do it, and we're working with lots of folks in that space. But my take is then how does that then expand into the wider area network, right? So and then if I look at data centers as a whole, data centers have got one big problem right now, and it's power. We talked about it in the previous one. you're going to see, my take is you're going to see data centers really big data centers be built in places like Norway because it's cold and they've got power, hydroelectric power, right? You're going to see data centers, move from, I believe you'll see a lot of data centers move from, say, London, which is a kind of hotspot, into locations like that, because you need the power and space to be able to create these AI data centers in the first place. That means, what does that mean for the edge? So are you gonna trombone back to Norway for every transaction? I think we're going to see a kind of a creation of a new capability in edge. It might actually be finally the killer app for edge that allows you to rely upon something local, something local that is talking to a huge infrastructure. Because I think we hear this, we're going to build our own model, we're going to build our own LLM. Just how hard that is, I think people underestimate. And not only that, as I say, just for one query, the scale of infrastructure that you need. And it's one of the things that, as I've learned more about AI, I've started to think that, actually, I'm not a big fan of the public cloud for running telco workloads, but I actually think that it's hard to see how companies and organizations are going to run these big AI capabilities in their own data centers. It just looks really, really difficult. And also the value will be in scale, not in potentially in the individual parts. So then yes, all the data that you feed into that, you need to make sure you can get hold of it. And actually, I think in our industry more recently, with streaming telemetry and all the other API stuff we've got, I actually think as an industry, telco's probably in better shape to get that data than many other industries.
Thanks, Neil. Francis?
I think it's also worth. I made a comment earlier about being intelligent about what we're using the network for. I think your worry is probably justified if we approach the whole idea of how do I communicate between my ChatGPT and the cloud, the wider cloud. If I just do that dumbly, yes, this thing is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. If we start building applications that are a little bit more aware of their context, aware of their edge capabilities, how we distribute it, we can be a lot more intelligent about the data. But it's really about thinking about the problem, how you distribute the problem, how you probably actually codify, rather than just, we already do this to some extent with, say, a CDN. That's what we do with the video. We distribute it, we make sure it's closer in order that we're minimizing the amount of traffic that we're having to move around the network. All of that comes into play, but it only comes into play if we're building the applications on top of it that work in that way. And one of my reasons for asking the question earlier about do we need better applications is because at the moment it's kind of free to the application to be dumb on the network. We don't challenge a dumb application. Probably the most famous one was when Apple first released the iPhone. It was really bad on signaling on the network, but that wasn't Apple's problem. That was AT&T's problem. So I think we need to just a little bit more into. We need to have a relationship with the application developers, how they're spreading the load, how they're spreading the distribution of compute and of communication. That's the only way that we're really going to solve this. Or we could just be dumb.
Thanks, Francis. In that case, let me just see Vivek. Question over there on the right.
A very quick question to build up on something Neil said, and the question's open to the entire panel, not specifically just Neil. How many telco operators do you know globally who are actually going to build their own large language models for the obvious reasons? It is GPU intensive, it is extremely complex. More importantly, it's undeterministic. You don't know what you're going to get at the end of that model because it is AI. So how many telcos do you know who are actually investing real money behind this? 4? Does that...
Sorry, building large language models specific to their particular infrastructure, 4 that I know of. They've invested, announced?
No, but they are using Llama 2 kind of thing. They are not investing from scratch in building a large language models. There's no telco that I know is building its own large language model. They're taking Llama 2, which all of us do, it's free, and using it for fine tuning. That's different than building the large language model. And for that, you don't need to have large data center of GPU clusters and so on.
So, but then just to double check, you know of 4 who are building from scratch?
No, I didn't say from scratch. Yeah.
So that's the question then for panel, in case somebody has insight, how many telcos in the world are actually going to go build their own large language models? Because if they aren't going to attempt to do this, the graph you showed with the OpenAI spike, that's basically where they're going to end up with the physics of compute and infrastructure. There is no alternative to it.
And
again,
comments?
Undeterministic, what's going to come out at the end of that model. With ChatGPT is sort of known now.
Yeah, look, I think for me, your question is an interesting one. For me, it's kind of what's the so what of it, right? So, look, I'm sure that there's probably some organizations that are thinking about how they would do that. My expectation is they'll learn very quickly that that would be not a great thing to do. And I think Raj's point about, and this is the challenge with this technology, is it's so new and it's moving so quickly. The terminology and the understanding of it is, what you knew last year has just been completely replaced with what's happened this year. So I would be amazed if any telco does that. I think it's just so hard for them to do that. However, do I think that there might be, and I've talked about this before, which is, the moment the cloud is kind of 4 or 5, maybe 6 operators, do you move to a world where, you have an AI organization that's better at networking because they focused on that versus another one that's better at manufacturing because they focused as that, and they, for the current hyperscalers to be good at everything feels challenging to me. Not impossible, but challenging. And I think quickly, we'll see, if all of a sudden, TelcoAI.com, who's a big cloud provider, suddenly become great at telco, they might mop up all the business. Then you're back into the usual telco debate about vendor lock-in, et cetera, et cetera. But I think I'd be amazed if anyone's really building the sort of scale thing that they would need to build.
Neil, thanks so much for those comments. Can I sort of move this on a little bit, because I know there's a few more questions I'd like to get to, but let me ask a related question then. What about training existing LLMs on telco-specific industry knowledge? Is this a per telco on a telco case basis, or is this the industry collectively is better placed to do that?
So I mean, that's a really good question. My fear is in that world is, do we end up with the usual kind of lowest common denominator? Because, well, we want to do it this way or we want to do it that way. I think, like any asset, how you train the tool that you're using to drive your business can be of differentiation. So, does that mean that we'll see a bit of fragmentation? I suspect yes, over time. If that doesn't turn into a differentiator, then we might come together. But I'm kind of reluctant to say, hey, all telcos, you should work on one model, because I think that will stifle innovation, would be my sense.
Yeah. Thanks, Neil. Francis?
I think the answer is both, actually, because if you're specializing and want to be about one company, your expertise, just be really clear what you think that expertise is and what your differentiation is. My observation of the telco industry is it is strangely very similar across most operators. Most operators operate at 98% the same. There's about 2% that is really different on that one. So if you're really clear what that 2% difference is and why it makes you different, go ahead and make your large language model. If you're not, learn from everybody else, because there are things you don't know, there are things you can't understand. If you can take the data from elsewhere and learn from that as well, you're probably in a stronger position for the 98% that is the same.
Remember, if you're the lowest guy, you've got the most to gain. So don't forget about that.
Yeah, good point. Thanks very much. I'm going to bring a conversation across to the other side of the room. Manish, you got a question there?
Yeah, thank you. I've actually just want to build on what was said earlier. I think in terms of telcos training the model, and large language models is what I'm talking about on GenAI. More broader perspective, we do not see that. We don't see telcos training. We actually don't see in any industry vertical. We actually are seeing a lot of fine tuning, a lot of rack kind of architectures that are coming up around these large language models. And what I want to get to is, the other thing we're seeing is a lot of assistant, code assistant, co-pilots on software development, virtual assistants, etc. The question I had for the panel is, do you see, what's the right step? Is it a customer support service agent that the telcos would benefit from, or a field support agent, or a planning agent? Where should they start with generative AI? That's one. And second question I have is around security and threat, especially with deepfakes. What does the panel think around that? What does that mean for telcos, especially in terms of revenue loss and revenue threats?
Great, thanks for those questions. Where should a telco start if they haven't done so already? And what about security and threats? Anybody want to take this first?
I'll go. I think that the security of this, I think we could have 6 days on that. I'll give a real example that happened to me. Someone phoned my mum, not me, pretending to be me, and asked to borrow money. And my mum only knew it wasn't me because the person was very polite. But that is a real thing that happened. And, I've heard about that from a few other security organizations. That is going to be a massive challenge for us to tackle. And I think trying to deal with it here is probably, more than what we've got time for. The second point, I always start with the customer journey, right? Where do customers interact with telcos, and where do you fall out of the happy path? Because I'll guarantee you that there is AI gold in where you're falling out of the happy path. I place an order, I get my service, and it's the thing that drives customers nuts. So, if you went to any telco, what are the two top reasons they phone? One, something's gone wrong. Two, they screwed up the bill. Imagine you could just AI fix that. And actually, these are things that are actually relatively simple. That AI is actually really well equipped, and generative AI is really well equipped to help you solve those issues, or at least tell you what you should do about it. So my take was, as always, was start with the customer journeys, figure out where you're there, figure out what's going wrong there, and actually that'll then point you to the other parts of your business and the other journeys that you've got, the planning journey, the design journey, and it will highlight gaps that are causing your customer journey to fail.
I'd add to that really, which is I come back to my slide, which is it's all about outcomes. What is the outcome you want to happen that GenAI could help with? If you're going into this one of the dangers of TelecomTV of these type of surveys where we say, have you got an AI strategy? Is honestly telcos don't. AI is not their product. It's not their service. It's not what customers buy from them. So it's a tool set that can be used for something. So if you're really clear, the critical thing is what is your problem? What is the thing you're trying to solve? AI and generative AI, or AI more generally, or analytics can solve those problems, but start on the basis of what is the problem I'm going to solve? What does it do for my customers? What does it do for my network? Whatever it is, I think it's having that tangible. I want to change something in my network. I want to change a behavior. That's the most important thing to drive this.
Thanks, Francis. Any more comments on this question? Akira, would you like to maybe comment about, from your perspective, where a telco should start?
At SoftBank, we are giving access to all employees to so-called ChatGPT. And of course, it runs on the closed network environment. And like some other panels talks, in a telecommunication company, you have external workload and also the workload for customer facing. And the sales guy, the reason why sales guys may want to use generative AI is to reduce the time to do a research or develop a proposal or analyze what customer says or what is the customer expectation to us. So they are using generative AI types of apps to do that. And for internal guys, like operation guys, they may try to find a way to reduce the workloads or working time to be more, efficient. So maybe the purpose of using the technology could be very different. And if we give just very limited access to some department, like just sales guys, just operation guys, this may limit the business opportunity which we as telecommunication company can explore. So we are giving that access, and we are still very early to tell what would be the result. But we see various departments comes up with some very positive report that I am reducing X% of the workloads, and also on the other hand, on the sales side, they are reporting that we are becoming more efficient. We are becoming more value-added guys to customers. So we are seeing that. And by the way, at SoftBank, we are investing massively to do generative AI. So we are building our own data center optimized for AI, and also we are putting more resources to develop our own LLM. I can't tell the details so far, but we are making massive investment to optimize and also to utilize our data more efficiently for telecommunication business.
Very interesting. We look forward to more developments on that next year, hopefully. Thanks very much. We are due to finish now, but I don't want to finish because we started a bit late. I'm looking for another question. I see a hand over to my right. You have the winning question.
Thank you. My name is Ben Hickey from IBM. Just going back to the point you made before, Guy, when we were talking about LLMs, and if I can draw a distinction between LLMs being one type of foundation model and multimodal models have been pretty hot with respect to video, audio, images. And I think they fit the use cases which we identified are a great place to start, customer care and a lot of people. Going back to what lots of people spoke about, the network facing, the inward facing stuff that would be a different type of foundation model using data such as packet captures, net flow, telemetry, what have you. What are your thoughts there about helping those foundations models to be created with the view that creating foundation models by one company alone is very difficult?
All right, thanks, Ben. Anyone to help with Ben's question here?
No, I totally agree with Ben in terms of actually creating, particularly around observability, and that was the conversation that I originally started with, is there a need for building some standardized models in that space? And what's the conversation we can have at an industry and open source community level? There is an interesting open source project called Kepler that's specifically around power management. But that's just one example, one small example, right? There is definitely a need in terms of a broader conversation across the industry to create what sort of KPIs do you need? What's the level? There are different open source projects, I know OpenTelemetry and Loki and on, which actually provide all of that metrics and data. But in terms of building those models and in terms of actually training using those training those models with the data that you observe is critical in improving the efficiency. I think I'll go back to Neil's picture about, I think what was the term you used for the blue control?
Yeah.
The difference between control and the actual, improvement that you saw, right? I think the better you can do in that space, the closer you can get between control and that improvement.
Yeah, so for the reasons Francis mentioned, I'm a bit skeptical about that, if I'm honest with you, because so I've worked in half a dozen, almost 10 telcos. Now working at Juniper, I'm exposed to a lot more, and actually the differences between telcos are not that great. And I kind of wonder is what more would you learn? So is it just get on with it and do it? I would say yes. Also, we have our fantastic platform Marvis, which runs our Mist Wi-Fi and enterprise platform. What we're learning from that is that there's quite a lot of similarity between the issues that enterprises face in Wi-Fi. And one enterprise, the only differences tend to be number of offices and number of people and number of devices. But actually the issues are kind of the same. So I wouldn't rule it out, but I go back to Francis' point about what's really different about the different telcos, but also what outcome do you really want to get to? If your outcome is to try and build something really quickly where having loads of resources to build it, enables pace, then maybe. But I kind of think just the mechanics of getting organizations just set up to do that, I think you could have done it by the time you've got that up and running.
So Neil, actually the point I was coming across from was if you need at any point some comparison in the context of, whether it's efficiency checking or whether it is which one's better, which one's worse, then you need something to compare to. If everything's different, then obviously you're going to have trouble.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, if you want to do something quick as an outcome basis, then yeah, sure, go and
So look, 100%. But I think, this is where I kind of get a bit confused about some of the other things about AI. If you're doing a better job in operations, your operation stats will tell you that already, right? And you can say, hey, look, the day before AI we were this bad, day after AI we're this good. So I think you've already got that capability, and also you can apply that to a lot of other things in AI. If AI does something bad, there's in many cases there's laws that already cover that. So the regulation around AI is super important. We have to get it right. But I think we need to just be careful that we don't kind of cage something that could be really differential to our whole world, not just in our space. If we think that we need to build something that's kind of AI specific when actually we've already got the stats that are already there.
And just so I understand, I think, so you're advocating here that you don't see a need for different telcos to build different foundation models and own data, which I'd agree with, but to the point of a multimodal or a foundation model that's not based on language, based on network, some form of network data. Do you see the industry coming together to address your point? Because it doesn't look like those foundation models exist yet. So
we've got about 10 seconds to clarify this, unfortunately.
So I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying telcos, get on with it and get a foundation and build it yourselves, right? Work with the vendor community who can help, you guys or us, others, right? But get something going, start learning, start doing, because the biggest challenge with this is the decision to do it, right? Let's get over that decision.
Great. Well, look, we'll continue this in the coffee break. Unfortunately, just as it gets exciting, I have to be the voice of doom and gloom to say that is it. We are finished. So that is the end of session 3. We have a short break. It's getting shorter by the second. A 10-minute coffee break next door, and then we are back here for a fantastic fireside chat with our special guest, Lord Holmes, who has arrived in and is sitting in the front here. So do not miss that. Round of applause for our guests. Thank you.